Welcome to Tough Talk. I'm your host, Paul Taros, and today my guest is Earl Lackie. Earl is not a career politician, doctor, or attorney. He describes himself as a middle-class guy running for governor. Welcome, Earl.
Thanks, Paul. Thanks for having me.
So before we get started, why don't you take a few minutes and tell our viewers a little bit more about yourself and, what your background is.
Sure. Well, you kind of stated a lot of it right there, not being a career politician and coming from the middle class. My educational background is automotive and diesel mechanics degree from Lincoln Technical Institute in Indianapolis, Indiana. And from there, I started a career back in Michigan. Been working in Michigan my whole life. I've gotten into different aspects and areas of work within the state of Michigan, from working on and learning how to use heavy equipment, backhoes, bulldozers, that type of thing, into driving trucks. Driving trucks got me into the oil field up north in Kalkaska. Working with the engineers, that was a very interesting field. Working on the oil rigs, it's also very dangerous. When the oil field slowed down up in Kalkaska, I came back downstate and got into some more different areas of work. I've had two small businesses that got me to learn about the ins and outs of what the small businessmen and the entrepreneurs have to go through, the amount of regulations that they have to fill out, and the fees and everything involved, which is one reason why I'd like to see government back out. We don't need to micromanage the small businessman or the entrepreneurs. Some of the other things that I've done is I've been a firefighter and rescue. I did that for 8 years, and that was also very interesting. And some of the other things that I've done, I've been a quality control supervisor for Hitachi. I've been a maintenance supervisor for Maxs Technologies. I retired from General Motors after 15 years of service there. And two of the things that I'm most proud of there was taking my firefighter first responder training to General Motors and being responsible for getting the first responder program initiated at General Motors. One of the things that we are most proud of there was in the first 6 months of implementing that program, we saved 2 people right on the assembly line by the training that the first responders received.
Wow.
The second thing that I am most proud of is, as a team leader at the end there, before I retired, was our teams are made up of about 30 people. My team had the lowest absenteeism rate within a plant of 4,500 people. We're real proud of that. And I contribute that to one thing: treat your people with respect. If you work with them, they will work for you. And the proof was right there. So having a wide variety, a diverse background of jobs, I feel I understand more about what the middle-class people of Michigan need and want than some of my opponents that are running that have only done 1 or 2 things in their career, and they're tunnel-visioned. They can't see the peripheral of what the people of Michigan need like I do.
Okay. Speaking of your opponents, several of the opponents have been traveling the state, holding town halls, but you haven't been invited to participate. Why is that?
Well, that's a good question, and I'm really not sure. I can only kind of guesstimate at this point. My understanding is there's been 6 town halls. I was only invited to one, the second one. The first one was closed to the public, and they weren't letting anybody in, including those of us who were candidates that were not technically invited. After the second one, I was no longer invited. Now, my understanding is Pat Colbeck and Lieutenant Governor Brian Calley are the ones that are controlling these town hall debates. And with that being said, after the second debate, when I spoke and came across as the middle-class guy, not a career politician, I was then basically eliminated from the list. The town hall meeting at Saginaw Valley State University, I was there. And Brian Calley actually sat at the table up front and told this room full of people, while I'm standing at the back where he could see me, because they all did, that they sent out invitations to all of the gubernatorial candidates, and only those 3 responded. Well, I know that was aimed at Bill Schuette, but I'm sorry, the lieutenant governor lied. I never got an invitation, nor did they ask me to come up and sit at the table with them while I was standing in the back of the room. So they only want the top 4, which is obviously 3 career politicians and Dr. Jim Hines.
Okay. So why are you running for governor?
When President Trump got elected, I saw a businessman, and knowing some of his background and starting out as a small businessman and growing and growing and growing, I don't have his billions of dollars. Like we said, I'm not rich. I'm just a middle-class guy. But watching him go from nothing in his early career, borrowing money to get started, and being able to do what he did, and then to be able to walk away from all of that and put it on hold, and to walk into the presidency because the people wanted a change. And I want to see a change. But I'm not seeing somebody who really understands the people of Michigan or that just want a pay raise. Some of the things that, like our roads, we may get into later, but our roads are a big topic right now. Watching the news the other night, 13 cars in a row in that 1 minute, minute and a half segment on television for the news of 13 vehicles with blown out tires right there. So to me, we need to do something. The career politicians have not done anything with our infrastructure, and the roads are part of it. For years, they've been putting Band-Aids on top of Band-Aids on top of Band-Aids. Something's got to be done. Somebody's got to stand up and take a stand and actually get something done.
Okay. Speaking of roads and infrastructure,
Yes.
Do you have any ideas on, do we need more money or better having these roads built better? What solutions are you considering?
Well, first of all, I believe the money is there. They've been able to find where the money that's been allocated for the roads, they've been dipping into it and taking money out. So then there's less money in the road fund to do the roads. The money's there. It needs to be left alone for road construction and repair. They got to quit robbing Peter to pay Paul. If the money was designed for roads, leave it there. The second thing we need to do is we got to stop using the lowest bidder. In today's world, we have more modern materials that we can use. There's plastics we can use. There's fibers we can use. Instead of using a 6-7 bag count in the mix of the construction, use 10 or 11. Make the concrete harder. We have a very high rate for our trucks. That our trucks can't cross the line and go into Ohio. I believe we're 160,000 pounds. They're only 80,000. We're half of what Ohio is, which is one reason why their roads are good. But we can build roads that will withstand higher weights. So using more modern materials in the road construction itself is a good start. We need to make the roads last longer. On top of that, you'll notice in some sections of roads, you'll be driving along and it'll be terrible. And then you'll get a few miles and it'll go great. And a lot of that has to do with the inspection. We need more inspectors to make sure that is the foundation as deep as it's supposed to be? Is the actual concrete that's being poured, is it as thick as it's supposed to be? So we need to update our rules, our regulations, and they need to be enforced. And I don't think they are.
Okay. What are some of the other major challenges facing the state of Michigan today?
Well, we've got quite a few, actually. My top 3 right now are the roads, obviously. That's part of our infrastructure, but water. Water is a big thing. and then, of course, taxes. Now, we've touched on roads. I'll touch on water as part of the infrastructure problem. And to me, there's two big problems that we have in Michigan. One is, in the last year or so, usually when people talk about water in Michigan, they're talking about Flint. Well, Flint's lead levels were astronomical. But what a lot of people in Michigan don't understand is there are areas in Detroit, Grand Rapids, Kalamazoo, Owasso, up north Alpena area, where the lead levels are actually higher than Flint's. So this is not just a Flint problem, this is a statewide problem. Now, I'm not saying that we're going to raise taxes and the state needs to jump in and fix everything. That's not it. I don't want to raise taxes. I believe we can do it with the amount of money that we've got now. It's going to take time. You can't go through and change 650,000 service lines from the street to a house overnight. It just doesn't happen. Now, some of the things there, one of the other problems that we have, in my opinion, is the 23 billion gallons of raw sewage being dumped into our freshwater system every year. To me, this is unacceptable. It's got to stop. This is one reason why last summer in July, Metro Beach was closed 3 times in 1 month because of high E. coli, simply because of the amount of rain we got, overflowed the ponds, and then the raw sewage was just being let into our freshwater system. Now, unfortunately, this is not something that people are going to want to hear, but if you're on a well or if you're on city water, that raw sewage is going to get to you one way or another. You may not notice it in smell or taste or anything else, but microscopically it's going to get there. So we have to stop this process. There are cities and townships within the state of Michigan that saw this coming. Port Huron's one of them. And they took it upon themselves years ago to start millages a little bit at a time, to put money aside to start curing this problem of the sewer, the drainage lines and the sewer lines, and separate them so that they're not both flowing together and overflowing the sewage ponds. So there are areas in the state of Michigan that do not have this problem. We need to do that all over the state and stop this problem from happening.
Okay. Under Obamacare, Governor Snyder expanded Medicaid under the Healthy Michigan program. Initial projections were that would cover 320,000 people. Today it is covering over 660,000 people. This program is costing $4 billion a year, most of which is being paid by the federal government. But this year the state will be paying $200 million, and by 2020 the state will be paying over $400 million. How do you think the state should address this problem, or is it a problem?
Well, yeah, it's a problem, and exactly how to address it, as far as that's concerned, I'm not really sure, but what I would like to do as governor would be then bring in some of the other big health organizations like Blue Cross and Blue Shield and talk to them and see if they've got any help in any way that they can boost our healthcare industry as far as that's concerned. The Medicaid expansion just wasn't working, and now that we're being laden with the whole bill, we're definitely going to have to take a look at it real hard and see if there's something else that we can come up with so that this $200 to $400 million expense is not laid on us completely. There has to be a different way of doing it. And exactly what do I want to do for it right now? I don't have an answer. What I would like to do would be bring in experts within the field and sit down and have a discussion with them and see what we can come up with to fix this problem.
Okay. Recently, a bill was passed titled or nicknamed the Good Jobs Bill, which basically gave huge tax breaks to certain companies. If you created 500 new jobs, you could keep 50% of the income tax withholding from the employees for a period of 5 years. If you create a minimum of 250 new jobs, paying 125% or more of the regional average wage, you were eligible to receive 100% of the withholding for a period of up to 10 years. So really, these were tax breaks for large corporations. Do you think this was a good bill?
For the larger corporations, yes, it was. Like we've said, I'm from the middle class. I had a small business, myself, 2 of them, and we employed people, okay, but not to that extent. So it was a good tax break for the larger corporations. My concern with this is, what about the little guy? What about the entrepreneur that's just opening up a sporting goods store and he only needs a half a dozen people at the most? Where's the tax break for him? Okay, we have to include everybody, not just the big corporations. We got to include the little guy in this too.
Okay. What's your opinion of Common Core?
It's not working. I think we need to repeal it. As far as our education system is concerned, I believe we need to put the money back into our public school systems. There are other things that we need to do that have been eliminated, such as skilled trades. We've been pushing college on our kids for so many years that a lot of these kids, they would go to college but then couldn't make it. And then they get out and they're frustrated, didn't know what to do, and then all of a sudden our crime rate started to go up because these kids had no skills. Well, not everybody is college bound, okay? My parents wanted me to go to college. Well, because I was good with my hands, being a mechanic, I like to make things work, and that's another reason I'm running for governor. Our state needs fixing, and I want to make it work. But as far as the education, we need to get back to basics. Kids need that don't want to go to college, or they're not college material, but they still need something to do. They need to be able to make an income. So if we have skilled trades that are starting, say in high school, they can learn how to build a house, they can learn how to do wiring and plumbing, put a roof on it. Now you've got a skill that these kids can actually go out and get a job. And there's a couple of excellent places that I have found recently. MIAT down in Livonia. They do turbines and airplane engines and such like that. And the day I went through there and did a tour with them, they were actually high school students with their parents doing the tour. And one of the things that they explain to these kids is, as juniors, you start now. By the time you graduate from high school, you'll also be graduating from here. Coming out of high school, you'll be able to walk into a job somewhere between $40,000 and $60,000 a year. That's not a bad income for a high school graduate.
That's right.
Okay. Plus, they've also got a degree from there. There's another startup foundation called the Didilian Foundation, who is starting up. Their plan with that foundation is to bring in more skilled trades as an actual school, so that, like when I went to school, I actually did that. In the afternoon at high school, got on a bus and we went to the tech school. That's where we learned how to do whichever you want to do. And that's what this foundation is about, is to bring kids from like high school in to let them learn skilled trades within the school that the Didilian Foundation is going to set up.
Okay. What's your opinion of smart meters?
Well, there's 2 schools of thoughts there. One is they're okay. It's just a low frequency RF that's being put out, and it's not of any harm. The other school of thought is that it's the radio frequency that's being put out is as bad as microwave with an open door. So it depends on which school of thought you go with. What I don't like about the whole smart meter aspect of it is people are not being given a choice. And because it's more or less a monopoly, this is where I think the government needs to step in. People should have a choice. If they want to stay with analog, they should be able to stay with analog. If they want the smart meter, great. And I think people are being overcharged. Charging people $10 a month to, quote, send a meter reader to your house to look at an analog is being way overcharged. I had a house in Pontiac, and the meter was inside. So I know they didn't read the meter more than once, maybe if I called them twice a year. Other than that, the homeowner can read the meter. So they're doing nothing but taking advantage of the homeowners by telling them they have to pay $10 a month to have somebody come out. No, the homeowner can do it. If the company doesn't agree with the meter reading and it's off by a lot, then they can send somebody out. I think it should be a pay-on basis and no more than twice a year. The rest of it can be estimated.
Okay. With smart meters, one of the arguments I hear quite a bit is privacy issue, where
Yes.
Especially when you have smart appliances in the home, that they can monitor, when you have your TV on, when you're opening your refrigerator, things like that. What's your view of that?
If the meter is just measuring the electricity, okay, you open the door of the refrigerator, the light comes on, you're using electricity. You turn on your microwave, you're using electricity. Any light in the house you turn on, you're using electricity. To me, that's okay. But if they get to the point, and I understand this is possible, where they're monitoring what you're watching on TV, they're monitoring what you're shopping for on your laptop, to me, that's inside the home is an invasion of privacy. So as far as the smart meter is concerned and what they're able to pull out of your house, we may have a constitutional issue here, and they may be breaking the law. So it needs to be looked at and investigated thoroughly.
Okay. What's your thoughts on our car insurance?
Our rates are too high. And that's a common complaint with everybody in Michigan. This is one of the areas where our rating needs to be reversed. We are #1 in the nation as having the highest insurance rates. Okay, now some of that, the fees that go into it are going into our, quote, disaster fund. Now, my understanding is we have about $23 billion in our disaster fund. When Flint happened, we had kids getting sick and people dying from the water. To me, that was a disaster. Something needed to be done and done fast, but no money was tapped into for that. Governor Snyder at that time, he did everything with the federal government and other state funds, like from the general fund. So leaving the disaster fund alone when you've got a disaster happening like that, no, I wouldn't have. I would have jumped into it a little farther.
Okay, but I think you're referring to the catastrophic
Yes.
insurance.
Yep.
And I've heard that because the insurance companies collected this money, that they claim they own that money and that it's set aside for, like, if you or I or somebody else were to get in a serious car accident and be disabled, for our care for the rest of our lives. That's what that money is
Right.
supposed to be for. So, one, the insurance companies claim that's theirs, and two, that it's reserved just for that purpose, for the purpose of providing medical care from an accident. So, do you think that, and the interesting thing about that is the state legislature does not know the actuarial assumptions used to compute the rate, how much we're being charged to contribute to that. So, you don't know the assumptions, whether, life expectancy, how many accidents, the
Right.
cost of these things. So would you be in favor of requiring the insurance company to disclose these actuarial assumptions?
Oh, wholeheartedly. You bet. I'm a big proponent of transparency and accountability. And that's one area that we need more transparency in is how are they calculating all of this? And where's the money going and how is it being spent? Now, they're saying it's theirs. Well, if it's theirs, then why is the state collecting the money? Through the Secretary of State. As far as some of the fees, if you look when you pay for your licenses, you'll look at there's a whole bunch of fees. And some of it is that disaster fund fee, which to me is astronomical. We could cut that in half and still keep collecting money because the insurance companies are not really tapping into that money. It's just sitting there and growing and growing. Well, when you've got that size amount of money, why do you need to keep collecting large amounts? We can lower people's insurance rates just by cutting that in half, right off the bat.
Okay. What's your view of free speech on college campuses?
Oh, boy, that's a hot topic, isn't it? Well, I'm all for free speech unless you're attacking or harming someone or causing a riot. And I believe basically that's the way the laws are written in short. Everybody should have their ability to have their voice heard. That doesn't mean that we can sit across from each other and scream at each other. That's not having a conversation. Free speech on campus, it's a good thing. People need to know both sides of the story. And unfortunately, what we're seeing on campuses with the, I don't want to call them riots, but as the kids get very emotional about it, they're not really taking the time, in my opinion, to consider both sides of the story. They want a speaker to come that's very controversial. Well, okay, listen to his side and see if you don't agree with it, that's okay. You can voice your opinion, you don't agree with him. But as far as, starting riots and fires and stuff like that, well, now the adults that are running the college are going to have to step in. If the kids that are going to college can't control themselves in an adult manner and fashion at a speech, even if it's given by somebody they don't like or agree with, then the college, I think, should have the right to not let it happen.
Okay. Okay, well, we're just about out of time. I really hope the other candidates for governor allow you to participate in future town halls.
We'll see.
And I want to thank you for being my guest today.
Thanks, Paul. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Earl.